Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another ACFO Presents Wednesday webinars. I am Danny Richard, ACFO President. Very happy to be here with you again with you guys. We're broadcasting directly from Gatineau. Today we'll be talking about performance management agreements, commonly referred to PMAs. And we have one of our labor relations advisors here joining us today is Grant Boland, but we can just pan over to Grant.
Hello, members. Grant Boland, Labor Relations Advisor with ACFO, coming to you live from Westboro.
Thanks, Grant. Thanks for joining us. So we thought it would be really timely to talk about performance management agreements because this is the time of year where we're doing them. Actually, we typically do them a bit earlier, but because of COVID, it's been pushed back a bit. I think that you're going to get a lot of relevant information, some of which you might have already heard, but we'd rather go through it again to let you know what your rights are. But again, most importantly, what we want to do here is answer your questions. As usual, the way we do that is we use Slido. So we'll just show you how that works again. You go to slido.com, S-L-I-D-O. It shows on your screen right now. You'll have a couple of questions. You put in a code. The code is ACFO-ACAF. This will allow you to have instant access to our little chat box where you can ask any question you want. You can ask them anonymously, and you can vote up the questions to ensure that whichever questions is the most popular, we will start with those questions. Vous pouvez également poser vos questions en français. On va les traduire pour vous en français, so whatever language of your choice is good with us. Before we go over to actually the presentation itself with Grant, I'm going to give you an update on COVID-19. As you can imagine, we're having, again, conversations with the employer. Where we stand right now is trying to determine the procedure of how to go back to work. So we speak with Treasury Board, the Office of Chief Human Resources Officer, and the plan right now is to determine what is the best way to return to work. And as you can imagine, there are many moving parts. You see, at TBS, their role is to give generic guidelines to the departments. But departments have various priorities, various mandates, and they might apply those guidelines various ways because there's a range within those guidelines. So I'll give you an example. D&D right now, they were looking for a return to office this Monday on June 1st, but it doesn't apply to everyone. Whereas other departments, such as Transport Canada, the DM at Transport actually put out a memo, and he said, had a town hall where they basically said, the telework is the default right now and will be so for the foreseeable future, even after COVID-19. And I had to clarify the comments afterwards, but really departments are going this in different ways. There are different policies. And then they consult with the unions, with ACFO. And we quickly realized that because every department has different ways, it's best for ACFO, because we know our members, to come up with our own guidelines, our own return to work policy. And we've developed that. It's out to translation right now. It's going to be posted on our website probably tomorrow. So if you want to check that out, if ever someone asks you, what are you comfortable with? What do you think we should be looking at? Well, we're going to have our policy posted. It's basically our guide to tell the employer, look, I know you're all developing your own policies, but here's how we would like to see things happen. Not the when. The when no one knows right now. It's dependent on many factors as explained in previous webinars. And by the way, if this is your first time tuning into one of these webinars, you can see the previous webinars on our website. There's a link to it. It's on YouTube. So we'll post that tomorrow. You can have a look at it, but here's the gist of it. Our position is that, first of all, everyone should stay home, because we've shown that for the majority of our members, we can telework efficiently from home. What we don't want to do is put our safety and security in jeopardy in order to return to work. That just doesn't make any sense. But there's many factors, right? There's which city you live in, what type of work do you do, which office do you work to? Is it activity-based workplace, workplace 2.0? Do you actually have an office that's isolated? There's your personal circumstances that need to be taken into consideration, and there's overall infrastructure. You know, is the public transit up and running? So regardless of these factors, our position is if there's no real need to go back to work, why should we put ourselves at risk? But that leads into something else. Do you have the proper equipment to do the job that you need to do? So for example, there are certain departments that are allowing you to bring your office equipment back to your house, dual monitors. You can actually take them and bring them in. But there are certain things that are very difficult to bring to your home, right? If you have an ergonomic chair, that's much more difficult to bring home. So the employer, some departments are offering to have that transported to your house. And it's very difficult because it not only is it different from department to department, it could be different from manager to manager. So within the same department, you might have a manager that says, absolutely, we're going to give you the equipment, wireless mouse, or ergonomic keyboard, dual monitors, chair, and a desk. And another manager in the same department might say, no, we focus on people that have ergonomic needs, which I could see why. So it's very variable based on varying factors. So our message is stay home, work from home. Now, if you have a reduction in productivity because you don't have the tools you need to do your job, again, the other paid leave, the code 699, is available to be used at your disposal. Make sure you're using it and you're being transparent with your manager. What you cannot do, please do not do this. Please do not say at the end of a week or at the end of a month, oh, by the way, here's how much 699 I use. Be transparent. If you're losing productivity either because of equipment or because you don't have access to the network or because you're taking care of dependents or someone that has a requirement, be transparent. And these times, the employer has been very reasonable. So if for some reason your specific manager is not being reasonable or something doesn't sit well with you, please contact us at ACFO, because there's no reason why, A, we need to be forced to return to work when we can show we can work from home, but working from home means having the right tools and the right mindset. So there's various factors that goes into that. So that's my message on eventual return to work. I want to do a quick note also on the CT community survey. So we've sent out a survey to you guys. This survey is so important to fill out. And I know there's a lot of surveys out there, right? But for us at ACFO, we have a challenge. You see, we represent about 5,000 members across Canada, 70 departments. We cannot be in all your departments. We rely on this survey to know what's going on in your department. What are certain things you're struggling with? What are certain trends that are happening? And we actually have a section on COVID-19. Based on your feedback from last year, we've made the survey shorter. It will not take you more than 7 minutes. I've done it myself. It took me 7 minutes to do it. I mean, if you're really slow, maybe 10, but trust me, it's not a long survey, but it is so valuable because the more people fill out the survey, the more data we have to bring to your CFOs. This is what we do with this. We take the surveys, that's anonymous. We take the trends and the data and we put the top 3 great things and the top 3 things that need improvement directly to your CFOs. And they want this data. They want to know from the grassroots what's happening. So please fill out that survey. All right, so I want to send it out over to Grant now. So we're talking about PMAs. I mentioned before why PMAs are important right now, but Grant will walk us through maybe the theory of these and try to put in a couple examples here and there. And you might have already seen some of this, but we want to do a recap because we know we get a lot of questions on PMAs because every situation is different. So we'll do maybe, I don't know, 10 or 20 minutes of the theory, maybe more, depending on how long it goes, and then really come back and take your questions. So in the meantime, if you have questions, you can ask them on Slido, and I'll throw it over to Grant right now to walk us through these slides. Grant, over to you.
Sure, thanks, Danny. I'm happy to be here to talk to you guys about performance management agreements because we do, in labor relations, it does occupy quite a considerable amount of our time working on these with the members. Depends upon what time of year it is, of course, whether it's the mid-year or the end of the year reviews. But it can occupy almost 50% of our time at certain times of the year. So, which we are happy to do for you. But if there's also more general questions, which we can get through here today, that will answer some of your more general questions, we're happy to do that here with you. And then also, if you have specific questions, you can ask them through Slido. And then if you have even more specific questions, you know, we really want to open the door to people to feel comfortable to contact us in labor relations to where we'll be happy to walk through you what the process is or walk through any concerns that you have with your performance appraisals in more detail. So if individual specific questions, I just want to open the door to you to feel comfortable to talk to me or any of my colleagues about them. But what we'll do is we'll go through this PowerPoint presentation, which has some sort of general issues here for you, general principles, as a jumping off point here for some of your more specific questions. So if I can get it turned to the first slide. Performance management agreements are a part of your contract. They are a part of your collective agreement. Although they're not, most of the more specific details do come about through a Treasury Board policy, but you do have rights that are listed out in the collective agreement, and I'll summarize those here for you on the screen. You have the right to be given a copy of your PMA. Second point here, I'll go into a little more detail, but you have the right to be assessed by someone who has observed or been aware of your performance for at least half of the period being evaluated. So just to sort of expand that out a little bit, because we do get quite a few questions about this specific article of the agreement, and it doesn't require management to have been, the person does not have to have been your direct supervisor or in your chain of command to do the evaluation. The key word there is who has observed or been aware of your performance. So this does allow some flexibility for management to have had somebody who is more peripherally aware of what your performance was to be doing the evaluation. You have the right to make written comments that will be attached to your PMA. Again, very important point here, which I'd like to just drill down a little bit here for you, because that's the recourse that's listed in the collective agreement for if you don't agree with what's, or if you want to raise any issue with respect to your PMA. It's to write and attach, physically attach them or electronically attach them to your PMA. So this is, I think, an effective recourse that you have, and it's also a reason why we would probably discourage people from filing grievances unless there's sort of a specific technical aspect of the collective agreement that's been violated, or if there's something, you know, for example, discriminatory or otherwise that's included in there, because it really does say right in the collective agreement that your recourse is to attach your comments. And I also want to say that I do think it is quite effective to attach your comments. You know, for the most part, what we see when a member has concerns about what's written in the PMA, we find that, you know, it's a management that's really hasn't done their due diligence, or they've done a sloppy job in terms of what the way that they've evaluated the member. And I, at least as an observer, as an outside observer, what I've always noticed or thought is that if a member does a very professional, very detailed job of rebutting what those comments are in the PMA, that can be very effective for any outside person, any hiring manager, any person who was to review them later on, to see, you know, a sloppy comments by the manager versus like very detailed professional comments by the member. So that's the direction which we would normally want to advise the member to take if you were not satisfied with what's in your PMA. And then you're given the opportunity to sign the PMA, and then just a point here that we get asked quite a bit with respect to that is members that are concerned about signing it because they feel that they don't want to sign it because they think that it means that they agree with it, and that's not what signing it means. Signing it normally just means that you were provided with the opportunity to review it. It does not indicate that you agree with it. Before I move on there, Danny, did you have any comments that you wanted to make with respect to this slide?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. It's, you know, I think you hit the nail on the head. Those comments are so important. And I'll give you an example, right? When I first started my career, I was a CRA, and then I moved to PSPC. And back then, performance agreements were different department to department. Some departments didn't have them. And I mean, I can tell you for me and my team, we didn't really care, right? It was more of a paper exercise, didn't really have any impact if you were good or bad. It didn't really change anything. Nowadays, this is a very formal and serious exercise because your performance assessments follow you from department to department. We'll get into more details of how it can be used, but your professionalism or the lack thereof can follow you now in those comments. So please make sure when you're doing your PMAs at the beginning of the year, the mid-year, and at the end, look at it from the eyes of someone that doesn't know who you are and what you've done. They're only reading based on those comments. So make sure they are professional. And even when, for example, you have a dispute between a manager and an employee and they don't agree based on what was said, and you escalate it, all they have are the facts. They might not know the people. So when the employer on one hand, or maybe your manager is not giving you full credit, and if you were to say, I don't believe I'm giving full credit, this is garbage, I'm really upset, that's not the best tone to be having as a professional, right? I'm not saying don't raise your concerns, but there's a way to raise those concerns. So the best way is really, if you feel you're not getting full credit, contact us at ACFO, and someone like Grant or another labor relations advisor can really help you message it in a nice way to get your concerns out while staying professional. Grant, back over to you.
Thanks, Danny. On the next slide, just a few key points, which you're probably already generally aware of with respect to performance management agreements is, number one, I mean, they're not a once a year or twice a year activity. Really, performance management is something that should be taking place throughout the entire year. So it should be sort of an ongoing discussion, an ongoing dialogue, so that you're not surprised at the end of the year when your rating is given to you by your manager. It should be something you're sort of like should be an ongoing discussion. So, you know, succeeded plus, you should be having a dialogue. Your manager should be making you aware that you're doing an outstanding job, and that could lead you towards a talent management plan. Similarly, succeeded minus. I mean, that should not come as a surprise to any employee that they're not meeting the expectations of their manager, and it can lead to an action plan. You know, and I would say for sure, if you receive a succeeded minus and it's a surprise to you, contact us and at ACFO. It's not something that you should want to see, but also it's not something that should be coming as a surprise to you. I think Danny's already touched on this. Next one is that more and more frequently the PMAs are used in staffing processes. It's not just a checkbox exercise anymore. They are really being used for that purpose now. And finally, you know, there are guidelines for what a PMA should be, and Treasury boards produce those. They're called the SMART objectives. I'll get into those in the next slide. But Danny, did you want to make any comments about these?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what, guys, I'll give you some numbers because you might not be aware of us. We get this often. Sometimes our members will say, is there a bell curve, right? Is there a certain percentage of people in this category and not? If your manager or your department has said, you know, there's too many people that are surpassed, or we have a certain cap on how many people can do it, that is simply not true. If it is true, please send their notes that hopefully they put this in writing to us at ACFO. I will give you stats, however. On average, year over year, you know, the scale is 1 is did not meet, and then 5 is surpassed, right? So 1 is you need to improve, 5 is the improvement. There's a range there. Typically, on every given year, the succeed, which is normally a 3, 65% of all public servants will fall within the 3, 65. That's the average. So whenever you want to fall out of that average, it requires more paperwork, more justification. So if I'm going back, you're number 3, 65% of public servants. Succeed plus, about 25% of public servants will fall in that category, number 4. And again, might be different year to year, department to department, but overall, that's what we sit at. Now, if you go to the other extremes, surpassed, which would be the best of the best, which is a number 5, normally about 3% of public service would fall in that category. So very few people fall in the 3. But if you go on the other side, a 2, a succeed minus, again, that's about 5% of people that fall within. Now, this is not just ACFO members. This is all public servants combined together. And about little less than 1% would fall into a 1. That is, did not meet. That would probably require an action plan there. But you can see there is a range. Now, it's not because there is a statistical range that if, for example, I have a team of 4 people and they're all superstars and I give them all a succeed plus. If someone were to come back to me and say, you know what, Danny, it's impossible that all your team are superstars, so, you know, grade them accordingly. Sometimes managers are not willing to push back, and I can see why. It's a lot of paperwork. They might need to burn some of the goodwill, but at the end of the day, you want credit where it should go. So if you're not being given full credit, by all means, make your points known, but please, delicate on your approach. An adversarial approach saying you're not giving me credit, this is BS, I don't like this, is not the best approach. So contact us at ACFO, but I want to give you that information because you need to have credit where credit is due. Grant, back over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Danny. We'll move on to the next slide, which is the SMART objectives. I mean, I think it is important to understand all of these. They are good guidelines, good objectives, and they are, they should be considered by yourself and by your manager when they're developing what the objectives are that you should be meeting. So the first one is the S is a specific, and it's a specific action, behavior, outcome, or achievement that is observable. So I won't go into, I won't expand on these any more than what's written on the screen there, because I think they are pretty clear, but it's worth keeping them in mind. Measurable, it is quantifiable and has indicators associated with it, so it can be measured. A, audience specific, it is appropriate and relevant to your target audience. R, realistic, is achievable with the available resources. And T, time bound, it states the time frame within which the objective will be achieved. And we do get a lot of questions in labor relations about these objectives. We do get a lot of employees who are, see objectives that they don't think are realistic and they don't think they are achievable, either in terms of like the volume of the work or the level of work, or just that the objectives are not specific enough, really, that they're too general, and they don't provide any real guidance to the employee in terms of what they should be doing. So sometimes that's an education process, more for the manager, I mean, not for the employee, but educating the managers in terms of like what they should be providing to the employee or the member in terms of the guidance. So we're happy to help with that. If you do have any concerns about what are your objectives and whether they are realistic, that they could be met or not, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Danny?
Thanks, Brent. This is so fascinating. Look, this all looks good on paper, right? Practically speaking, though, here's how it normally works. And I'm only speaking from my experience and what I've heard of our members, but typically your department will set departmental objectives, and then there's a trickle down, right? There's always one on ethics and whatever, but sometimes, yes, they might not be relevant to you, but you've got to be careful how you push back here. Because I'll give you an example. We had a member that in their PMA was at the beginning of the year was told, one of the expectations is to write clear and concise briefing notes, right? This is, I forget, was it FI3 and FI4, but it was higher up. And they said, okay, that makes sense, right? Of course, you want to have in clear and concise briefing notes. But at the end of the year, how do we determine, how do we qualify clear and concise? Says who? Says my boss? Says my boss's boss? Says me? My point I'm trying to get across is whenever you're looking at through the SMART lens, you want to look at it through this lens. You want to say, okay, does it respect the criteria? But at the end of the year, could this be used against me? And I'm not saying the employer is against you here, but you want to look at it through the lens of, okay, how could this be misused here? Because you, at the end of the year, it is too late. It's not too late, but it's better to address these at the beginning of the year versus than a year later, because a year later is much more difficult, right? So when you look at it, for example, if you're being told you need to produce, I don't know, 50 financial reports, whatever, I'm saying any number here. Okay, 50 is a number, financial report, okay, it's good. And then members might ask, well, what do I need to get a Succeed Plus or a Surpassed? You've got to be careful when you're doing your SMART at the beginning of the year, because what you don't want is that at the end of the year, 12 months later, it might be too late. So take this very seriously. So the SMART is very important. Grant, back to you.
Thanks, Danny. So we'll move on to the next slide, and it's really about preparing for the PMA discussions. And I'll say, without going through all of the bullet points here, I'll say that, in labor relations, we're not trained in terms of coaching and employment coaching. There's EAP services, or you can find other services that can help you with respect to this. But I will say, just based on my own experience working in the field, feedback is such a critical thing in terms of our development as professionals. And receiving feedback is an important skill. So without, I say this as a general, I'm not defending managers in terms of how they provide feedback, because there's also a lot of lessons that can be learned in terms of how to give feedback to other people. But I would say generally, you know, I just noticed that there's a lot of, and not just talking about financial officers as well, just talking about general professionals, there's a real resistance to receiving feedback, and there's like certain defense mechanisms that we develop that make us resistant to hearing things that we should be open to hearing, even if they're not necessarily delivered in a way that's like the best way. So even if you're getting, even if you're hearing things from your supervisor or manager and you don't agree with what they're saying, I would always encourage any member to try to look for things, some seeds or seeds of development within what they're telling you, and ways that you can use that to your advantage in order to become better at your jobs. So that's just a general comment in terms of like preparing for PMA, is to just be open to what you receive, and doesn't mean you have to be you have to accept all of it. It just means that there's these PMA discussions can be very valuable in terms of like learning what our blind spots are, learning what our weaknesses are, and trying to improve in those areas. And also in terms of accepting things, quality, the work that you've done too. So when there's a way to learn from the good things, and sometimes it's just as difficult to hear positive things about yourself and to really absorb those things as well too, because a lot of people, most people probably tend to be have their guard up about those things as well too. So I would say be open to the positive and negative aspects of the PMA process, with also understanding what your rights are. So of course you have the right, you have your collective agreement rights, and you have just your own ethical rights to, you don't have to accept all feedback. You don't have to accept feedback that borders on harassment. You don't have to, you have certain specific rights. But just for the vast majority of us, we're talking about learning from and trying to become better at our jobs. So I would say be open to receiving feedback. Danny, did you have anything you wanted to say on that slide?
Yeah, Grin, I guess I would add, it's so important to have that feedback throughout the year. And I think you very clearly pointed out, it should never be a surprise if you're a surpassed or succeed minus, right? In either direction, you should have a very good idea of where your PMA is going. And more often we're seeing managers asking their own employees to fill out the PMA for them. And I could see a reason for that, because as the employee, you know yourself throughout the year, what you did, what you achieved. I would strongly recommend keep note of it, keep track of it. If you did something good, I don't know, your director said good job or fantastic work, client said this, take note of it, because everyone does this, including myself. We often forget, and we only remember what happened recently. And this will go both ways, where maybe the last month of the year you struggled, and you'll get an assessment that says, well, you know, you really struggled this year. Well, no, this is not the average for the year. This is just the last month. So you want to pull out all the good things and maybe the bad things that need improvement, so to showcase exactly, look, I've taken this exercise seriously, and I've taken it upon myself to do most of the legwork for you. I can tell you as a manager, this is something we strongly appreciate, because I don't have to do, and say I have, I don't know, 5 people under me, I don't have to do an, okay, what did he do for this day? No, if everything has been clarified in point form, then I can just confirm, oh, that was true, that was true. And if there's something on there that I disagree with as a manager, we can have that dialogue. So please use the opportunity of a PMA for you to showcase your worth, your pros, and something you need to improve on. It'll make your manager's life a lot easy. I would also say at your mid-year review, if you want to set yourself up for success, ask those open-ended questions. Ask, is there anything you see where I need improvement? Something where, the reason I say this for 2 reasons. One is, it's very difficult for your manager to say you're a succeed minus at the end of the year if at mid-year they say, you know what, I don't see anything you need to improve on. So you're kind of setting them up to say, well, if there's nothing you need to improve on, the baseline is going to be at least a 3, right? But also because if ever you're applying for a competition, it gives you a good idea in terms of your future reference, right? So if you're looking to apply for a deployment or a promotion, having that dialogue mid-year, beginning or end of year, saying, is there anything you see I need to improve on? It allows your manager to maybe get their foot in the door and say, you know what, Danny, a couple of times here when you're writing your emails, I see maybe some typos, maybe you want to work on that one, right? So it shows that you're much more receptive to get that feedback. And as managers, it makes a big difference. Grant, back over to you.
Sure, Danny. We're on to the last slide here, and then we'll move back on to Slido and take some of your questions. So if there's anything we didn't cover here, please feel free to ask. And I think we've covered most of what we wanted to talk about here in terms of best practices. Really, this is an ongoing, PMA is not just a twice-a-year activity. It's an ongoing dialogue that you should be having with your colleagues, with your subordinates, with your supervisors, in terms of how things are going. So asking questions, as Danny referred to, open-ended questions, looking for feedback, keeping a record of your successes and your challenges, and taking ownership of your learning, and really using this opportunity as for growth in terms of your own career, in terms of strengthening your strengths and strengthening your weaknesses as well. Danny, any closing thoughts there on best practices?
Yeah, sorry, Grin. I kind of stole your thunder there by overreaching the best practices. But look, friends, PMAs are here to stay. PMAs have been part of our collective agreement for a long time because we want our members to get the feedback. Regardless of how the employer wants to do that, we want that feedback. What I want to tell you that's not formally said is, it reminds me of competitions where you could be a great worker, but if your social game is not there, if you're not networking, if your attitude is maybe not in check, this is where you get caught sometimes, right? So the average member will get succeed, a 3. And the question we get is, how can I get to the next point, right? It's less about, I would say, the technical skills, the work that you do, more about the attitude that you have, the people that you know, the problem solving that you're doing. To me, the PMA is an afterthought. So when someone is writing your PMA, I would say 99% of the time, they already know where you want to be, and they just fill in the blanks to get you to that mark. When you're a superstar, they're going to make you shine. They're going to want to give you to that next level. And you might say, how do I become a superstar? Well, make yourself useful, have a positive attitude, and be a team player. It's always the same things, my friends. The PMA just formalizes what happened during the year. And we'll close on one thing as well before we go to the questions here. You've got to be careful. So we've just gone through, what your rights are, the SMART objectives. You've got to be careful not to lean in too much into your boss here, right? So if, for example, you've recently changed jobs, or maybe now at the beginning of the year, your manager is asking you, okay, well, how come you haven't filled out your objectives? What's going on? And you were to say, well, I don't think they're smart, and you're pushing back. Whenever you're pushed back a manager, your tone and how you say it is very important. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. I'm not saying you shouldn't push back. How you say things is much more important than what you're actually saying, because people will interpret things differently, especially in this day and age where we're emailing a lot of things. Your tone and your words, those are important. So if you feel you're at the beginning of the year, there's something that's not right with you with your PMA, reach out to us. Mid-year, reach end of year. Right now, if you feel you're not giving full credit, reach out to us. We can give you feedback, tips and tricks, how to word it properly, because our labor relations at ACFO, this is all they do. Not just PMAs, but that relationship, how to speak to the employer, that's what speaks volumes. Okay, we're gonna go to questions here. Again, to ask a question, you go on slido.com. You put in the code ACFO-ACAF. You see everything on your screen right now. So Grant, I'll throw it over to you. First question we have here, I got a succeeded. How can I convince my manager to offer me a talent management plan? And I'll have comments to that as well. But Grant, over to you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Danny. I mean, I think this is a good question. We get this question, and I'll reframe it as well too, because we also get the one where we've got somebody who's got succeeded minus or did not meet, and they don't want to go on an action plan. And I think it's the same. I'd probably have the same answer for both of them, which is this is a little bit of the soft skills that may or may not work. So it's no guarantee, but a lot of you have your rights, of course, that are in the collective agreement, right to attach comments, you have your grievance rights, but there's a lot of these other things like soft skills, which are here's your opportunity to use those for negotiation. And I would say most of the PMA issues that we deal with, when they do get resolved positively, they get resolved positively because the member has sort of been able to negotiate for themselves wording or agreements on their own with their manager without our involvement. So we're happy to coach them through that. But oftentimes, you know, if somebody doesn't agree with the wording or something that's included in their PMA, yes, they can write up what their disagreement is, but sometimes the best way is for them to just go and have a dialogue with their manager, express what their concerns are. So here I would say that this is about having a dialogue, having good communication with your supervisor, pushing them for the things that you think that are important to try to achieve what you want to achieve. Danny, did you want to add something on that?
Yeah, I mean, this one is so interesting because we all want to have a Succeed Plus, right? Obviously, there's two real consequences to the PMAs in my view. If you're a 3, nothing happens. You know, I gave you the feedback, everything is going according to plan. Great. Is there any concrete actions taken? No. There's 2 that make a difference. If you're a Succeed Plus and actually surpassed, typically it will lead to a talent management plan. Basically, you're identified as ready for promotion and you'll receive more opportunities, right? That's the first one. The second one is if you have a Succeed minus or did not meet, now there's an action plan of how do we get you back up to par, right? So you don't want to be in that category. But if you go on the Succeed Plus side, the challenge with that is if you believe you're a Succeed Plus or even a surpass, ultimately the employer decides which box they tick mark. Now you can say I disagree with this one, but they decide if you're going to be part of the talent management plan. And as Grant just alluded to, those soft skills, where it happens, my friend, I cannot tell you that how many times I've seen this where someone is convinced they're a Succeed Plus, right? They have the facts, everything is there. But for some reason, and I know which one, their manager does not want to give them that Succeed Plus because they feel they're not ready. Maybe they're not liked, their attitude, they're not solving problems. Don't focus as much on the details, but focus on, again, the 3 things. Solve actual problems, make yourself valuable, have a positive attitude, and be a team player. If you do those things, your PMA will be a breeze, and that's how you'll get more opportunities. More and more people that have a Succeed Plus get led to talent management, which will lead to a non-advertised promotion. Now, I'm not saying that's right. It should be fair competitions, but that's the way it's working right now. While we're working on fixing this, play the system. And what I mean play is you got to make sure you get your breadth of experience out there, not just your technical skills, but your soft skills. Ask for that feedback. Be known that you have expectations for yourself and for the organization, and you actually want to be a team player. Next question, Gwen. We are asking, oh, I like this one. Managers can have access to my PMA quite easily before hiring. Why couldn't I have access to a manager's PMA in order to decide if I want to go work for him or her? Might be privacy issues here, but Grant, over to you.
Yeah, I think privacy issues on this one. I wasn't sure whether this was a serious question or not, but it's actually one of the best questions. It's a great question. I would say for privacy reasons, you're not going to be able to get access to that. But it's another reason why networking, you know, is so important. You know, in terms of and LinkedIn and using your relationships, because ideally when you're accepting a job in a new team or with a new manager, it's because you want to go work for them and you're comfortable working for them. So I would say I would encourage you to find out as much information you can as from about who your manager is before you can, but you're not going to be able to get access to their PMA.
And Grant, I like where this question is going at, and because I think it's a very valid point. Often when we change jobs, either departments, whatever it is, a deployment or a promotion, we'll focus on the duties, right? What job am I going to do? We can tell you at ACFO, I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but a high percentage of workplace conflict does not come from the duties themselves. It comes from the people. So I can see why, you know, you want to know your manager you'll be working for, what's their performance like? And unfortunately, you can't have access to theirs, but you can talk to the team. You know, if I'm applying for a job in the government, and I'm going back, I say, you know what, I want to meet who I will be reporting to directly, because sometimes you'll meet a director or DG or something, someone higher up, but I definitely want to meet who I'll be reporting directly to get a feel of does the attitude mix, are we clicking? And I would also add, I'd like to meet the team, at least a couple of people from the team to get their feedback on that boss, right? So I get where the question is coming from, but unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Grant, the next question. I work harder and better than my coworkers, yet everyone in my team receives the same rating as me. What should I do?
Yeah, this is a tough one, and I think we do get this question quite a bit, and I probably don't have a really good answer for it. You know, it's obviously the managers should be you know, managing to the individual and not just giving a general ratings for everybody in the group. But I guess I would say that performance management is more than just a rating. So this is you know, they should be giving you specific training. They should be giving you specific guidance, things to improve. So even if people are receiving all the same rating, which I don't think that really should be possible mathematically, but even if people are receiving all the rating, the content of what's in the performance appraisals should be specific to you in terms of helping you to get better. So if it's not, I mean, that's a good reason to contact us.
Yeah, and I would add to that one, Grant, that as you point out, it's difficult, right? The best thing to do in this case is to contact us. But I would say your work, once you've documented, right? If you believe and you're adamant that you should be a Succeed Plus or a Surpass, you should be able to document the why. And by contacting us, you know, we don't know, our labor relations advisors, they're not our members, they don't actually do our work. But for example, if you've received an award from senior management, if you've been praised by your clients, if on many occasions you went above and beyond the call of duty, you should be able to build that case. And if we're convinced that, you know what, you're probably right, this does look like a Succeed Plus, we could always ask or coach you how to get it revised, or have a conversation with your manager first of all. But if your manager still refuses, how to get it escalated. But keep in mind, this is very delicate, right? This is where the soft skills are so important. So for example, you think you have a clean-cut case of a Surpass Plus. You contact us, and we're like, you know what? We agree with you. It seems odd that you didn't get a Succeed Plus. And you go back with your manager and you say, hey, you know, I really feel like I'm being shortchanged here, and they still say no. Then you have to decide, do I want to go above my boss's head? Now, even though you might be right to do so because you really feel like anybody that looks at this objectively would give you a Succeed Plus, you're going to be working with your boss, and they might not take it lightly that you went over and above their head. This is the dance that we must play that is very delicate. That's why when we're giving you your rights and our opinion, we want you to factor in as well that so what happens if you go over your boss's head, you get a Succeed Plus? How is that going to make that manager feel? Even though you didn't do anything wrong and you were vindicated, well, that manager might get upset a bit because now it looks bad on them. So that's a delicate conversation to be having. So please, if you feel this way, please contact us. Grant, next question is, not all managers complete the PMA to the same level of importance and details. How can this be a merit-based when applying to a process, as some process mentioned?
Yeah, Danny, I'll take this and I'm going to merge this with the next question that we have in there as well, too, if that's all right. And we can jointly reply if you want. But the next one is PMAs are a waste of time. The ratings, such a game and inconsistent across divisions within a department and across the government. So what is the point? So I think both of these are kind of speaking to the amount of frustration that we have within the membership with respect to PMAs. And I know that Danny hears this all the time, just like I do, from the members in terms of what this process is. And you know, I'm not going to sit here and defend the PMA process, but it is what it is, and this is not going to be going away, I don't think. The PMA process. So I would, you know, I would encourage anybody to look for the positives when you can from within it and try to improve it. And when you have, if you have an opportunity as a manager to, you know, when you are working on your employees' PMAs, to take the process seriously and to try to use it to help to help out your employees. So try to learn from whatever your frustrations are. And in terms of dealing with what those frustrations are, you know, I mean, I don't necessarily have any really good advice on that one either, other than, you know, you do have rights that have to be respected. So you shouldn't, you know, you can't be used to abuse you, nor should it. And Danny, help me out here on this one, because this one is really a struggle, I think, for a lot of our members, right? Like,
absolutely. I get the frustration. So at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, well, it's within like a 2-month sprint, right? So you got April, May, and March, and everything's tied in. I was just saying before, the conclusion of all this, of the PMA process, is either you're going to be tagged as a superstar ready for promotion, or you need some help. But I will say this, it also protects you as a member. We've always had in our collective agreement that we want our members to have genuine feedback. The challenge is often it's not genuine feedback, right? It's, we got to do this thing, whatever, just get it done and click this box, click that, release yours, do mine. It's not taken seriously, because if you're managing 5, 15, you don't have time to do it. And that's why it's a delicate dance. You want to do that. Maybe it goes to the next question. You want to have the chance to make yourself shine, so that you make it easier for your boss to actually give you credit where credit is due. But I'll give you the opposite case here. What were to happen if we didn't have them? And at the end of the year, your boss says, you know what, you're really not doing a good job. We're going to have to let you go. You would have no mechanism to say, what do you mean? I've received no feedback, no areas of improvement. It protects our members. And this has happened in the past, where a member was told this, that, for example, you know, you've not been doing a good job for years now, so it's not going to end up well for you. And we pull out the PMAs and we say, wait a second, you're telling me that our member is not performing well, yet when we pull out the PMA, it's succeed, succeed, succeed. So what's going on here? Is it the fact that they have a new manager that maybe doesn't like them? Because in the past 3 years, there's never been an issue. So I know it's a lot of work and it might seem tedious and sometimes useless, but I would encourage you all, make sure you're doing the job well, because these things follow you and they could be used to promote you or against you. So they actually count now. I wouldn't have said this 10 years ago, but nowadays they actually count, even though it can be a frustrating process, that's for sure. Grant, next question. Can ACFO have a Rate My Director app so we can know what we are stepping into when we join a new org? Well, I'll tell you what, I'll comment on this one, Grant, if you don't mind. We actually do have such a thing with our community survey. So sometimes members will reach out to us and say, you know what, for example, I'm considering applying for D&D. Can you tell me what you've heard of D&D from an FI standpoint, AU standpoint, AS, like, so when you fill out your surveys for your department, it gives feedback to other members as well that they can view, because this is available to all of our members once the surveys are complete. Now, granted, it's not specific to a specific manager, because that would be could be seen in bad faith here, right? If we have these hidden things that says this manager's bad, this manager's good. But I would also add that this is why your informal network is so important. I will tell the executives know this. Before they hire someone, they will ask everyone they know if they know you, because they're not going to limit themselves to what you wrote on your resume and your application. They want to know, okay, who knows this person? That's where the magic happens, friends, is when you're connected enough that you can have other people confirm or deny what is being said either on your resume or what people have said about you. It's so important to do this. But that's my take on this manager assessment guide. Any thoughts on that one, Grant?
Yeah, I don't know that I could add anything more. You know, we really have learned a great deal from the engagement surveys as well. And then the other thing I think we've learned a lot from is the rep network. So the rep network, which was created by ACFO about 10, 12 years ago, sort of has allowed us to have a lot more ears and eyes on the ground, if that's an expression, to understand a little bit more what's going on within different departments and different groups. So I think the reps have provided us with a lot more information for us to help us understand, like, what are the good departments to work in, what are the troublesome ones. So we're not we're not the only source of information that you could have, and you can ask your colleagues and talk to your colleagues about these sorts of things. But I would say that we're a lot more plugged in than we have been ever in the past.
Grant, this next question we get a lot, so I'm glad that's being asked. My manager asked me to complete a self-assessment. Can I refuse to do it since it's not my job? And maybe I'll just change the question, Grant. A, do I have the right to refuse to do it? And B, do you recommend that I do that or not? There's two things there. Grant?
Do you have a right? I would say you don't have a right. I mean, if insubordination is when you refuse a direct guidance from somebody who's in your chain of command. So refusing is not a word I wouldn't encourage members to refuse anything that their manager is requesting on them, unless it was a health and safety issue. They can certainly talk to us if they have any concerns about specific things that they're being asked of. But a self-assessment seems to me like it would fall within an employee's work duties, generally speaking, even if it's not specified within their work descriptions. So I would encourage them to participate in it, in fact. Danny?
Actually, yeah, you know, Grant, to your point, I would love this opportunity. This is your opportunity to control your own destiny, because you can showcase everything that you've done. Now, if your boss is asking you to do the assessments for your coworkers, that's another thing. But I think, as Grant pointed out, I think it's reasonable, and I would love this opportunity. In fact, I would suggest it to my boss. I say, you know what, I know PMA year-end assessment is coming around. If you don't mind, maybe I could start the lead work. I'll show you my bullet points and maybe make it easier for you, right? Because this is the best way, in my opinion, for you to A, showcase what you've done, and B, help your boss. Because remember, your boss, as much work as it might be for you to do yours, they have to do one for every single one of their employees, plus their own for their boss, right? So I would encourage everyone to do this. Next question. Last year, there was a discussion, was discussed on updating job profiles. What is the status on this? What if your profile isn't accurate? Doesn't this affect my PMA? I think they're referring to job descriptions on this one. So maybe I'll take this one. So yeah, job descriptions is something that needs to be reworked, because the majority of job descriptions that are out there are 30 years old and really do not reflect the duties that are being done. But I want to emphasize a point here. A performance assessment is not a job description. So when you're looking at your SMART objectives, it should not list all the tasks that you do, and every single task should be, it needs to be higher up, because your job description might have 100 lines, and you wouldn't want to have a PMA with 100 lines. That would be unmanageable, right? So there are two distinct documents used for distinct purposes. So as the question was asking for an update on that, we are working with the bigger departments, I would say, the D&Ds, the PSPCs, the ESDCs, to work towards more of a generic work descriptions that applies to many of our members, but I wouldn't confuse both of them, because your PMA is really separate. Grant, any thoughts on that one?
I think you covered it. That's how I understood the question as well, too, Danny, and you answered it. So
okay, great. The next question, and we got a lot of questions here, so that's good. Remember to vote the questions up, friends, because I'm not sure we'll have time to get to all the questions. So vote for the ones you really want us to answer first. Next question, Grant. Does a potential employer have the right to ask to see my previous PMAs as part of the hiring process?
Do they have the right to ask? I mean, normally what we see happening is they're asking the employees now at this point for the employee to provide copies of it. And yeah, I mean, I think they have the right to ask, certainly. And the PMA is not your own personal property. It is a Government of Canada property. And that's Government of Canada employer-wide. So I think they would, if they wanted to force the issue, I think they could get copies of the PMAs, yes. I think it's probably members should expect now that they're going to be asked for them. That's why it's an important process to go through, and important to get the wording or to get your comments in as professionally and accurately as you can. So I would say I would be of the expectation. I have not seen a case in front of the Public Service Labor Relations Employment Board with respect to this, but my expectation would be that they would be able to get these if you are participating in the process. And my expectation is that a lot of employees will be asked for these if they are not already being asked for copies of these.
Yeah, Grant, I agree. We're seeing more and more of these when you're applying for a job, that your potential manager, supervisor, director, whoever it may be, will. I'm not saying they'll go behind your back, because it would entail a lot of work, because they don't have actual access to it in the system. But they are asking the candidate to provide last year's 2-3 years worth of PMAs. Now, do you have the right to refuse that? Let's say you do. Even if you did, do you want us to be saying no to that question, right? That is very telling if you're saying, I'll give you last year not the year before, but I'll give you the other year before, right? Your PMA now is an official document. Please, I can't state this enough. Make sure it is completed accurately. And even if you had a succeed minus, you want to have the opportunity to comment on that, right? Perhaps that year I was going through some mental anxiety, didn't work out, and it leads to succeed minus. And then the next year I can show I'm on the right track, everything is going well. So because the employer is asking it more and more, I would definitely encourage you to share it, because the minute you say no, I will tell you, for me, it would raise a red flag. And even if you don't share it, it'll probably come out when they do the reference check, when you talk to your previous bosses. So you want to be transparent, but it's very important to document your PMA to make sure you showcase everything on there. Grant, the next question. I just received, oh, I changed ranks now. Okay. Can my manager write information in a PMA based on a questioning information received by a colleague on me and write the comment in PMA without the source?
Yeah, they voted up a more difficult question to answer here for sure. And I've had this question on multiple occasions. So the question is, can they write it up? And I think they probably can. Should they? Is a completely different question. So, I mean, I think that a member who was concerned about some of the information that was getting included into their PMA and where it was sourced from should definitely be contacting us with the specific details, because I think that one is the answer I would give is probably very context dependent upon what's included in there. So for example, you know, if it was like a very general comments, either positive or negative, that were included in, but not sourced in a way that the member understood where it was coming from, then that's, you know, they're probably okay to do that. But once you would get into like a very specific criticism or details that you would want to be able to challenge if they were inaccurate, then I would say this is very questionable that it would be included without providing a source. So I'm sorry to dance around that one, but I think the answer is probably very, very context dependent in terms of what is actually being written in there. You know, please contact ACFO if you have a specific question about this.
Yeah, and I would add to this one, Grant, I completely agree with you. They should contact us because it is case by case. But I'll give an example here. If your manager were to say, say Joe, Grant's my employee, and I would say, you know, Grant, I'm going to have to give you a succeed minus because one of the many issues we've noticed is your attendance record. You're not punctual. You're coming in late. And Grant would say, oh, I'm surprised. I mean, I've never been late to my knowledge. Can you give me a specific example? And if I were to say, well, no, I'm not going to give you an example. I don't want to get into the details. So you definitely have the right to have specifics, right? If you're not giving specific feedback, then you can't improve yourself. And if then I were to tell Grant, well, you know, I've heard that Joe here has mentioned on a few occasions, I mean, I wasn't there, but he's mentioned that you've been late on a few occasions. So that doesn't look good on your performance. Okay, well, maybe that's just hearsay. Perhaps I've sent a note to my manager or my director saying that I was late. So I think the important thing to take back here is it may or may not be taken into consideration, but the specifics definitely matter. So I would ask for specifics. And if you disagree with the specifics, then definitely contact us. All right, we're running short on time here. We'll try to take 2 or 3 more questions if we can. Grant, I just received positive feedback verbally, but not in writing. How do you make the positive verbal comments visible in my PMA?
Yeah, I would say this is maybe a soft skills response to this. I mean, there is a way. I mean, you can include them in your own comments, quotes that you know, whether it's from your clients or from your manager that you thought were important to get into writing. But it's a bit of a balancing act there in terms of you know, if you already believe that you were being if these are already positive comments which you've received and you already thought that you were being fairly evaluated, this might not be something you'd want to push too hard on. But if you were, you know, concerned about other aspects of your PMA, but you did, you know, you wanted to make sure that those positive comments are included in there, then that's a good time to use your own section of the PMA there for including your comments, just to detail in to the best of your recollection what the verbal comments were. Danny?
And Grin, again, just beautifully said. The soft skills are, friends, I can't tell you enough how the soft skills are important here, because it's how you say it, right? So I'll give an example. If Grant is just giving me, say we meet for our annual assessment, and he says, "Good job, Danny. You know, you really outperformed yourself this year. Did an amazing job, and I think you're a solid 3 this year. Good job." And in my head, I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. He said I outperformed, doing a good job. Feels like I'm a 6C plus. I don't want to push too back. So what I would say is, you know, thanks for the positive feedback. I love it. Would you mind if I just put a few notes on that, you know, I've got some positive feedback in my PMA, right? Asking your supervisor how they feel of you doing something gives you an opportunity to highlight that I would like to put this on there, and it puts it on them to say, how do you feel? Are you comfortable if I put, and if they say no, that would raise some flags in my head. But again, I wouldn't be adversarial about this one. So how you bring it up is really important, because if you're getting positive feedback, you want that to be highlighted, but how do you get it in there? Again, contact us. It's the best way to do it. We can, you know, our labor relations advisor do this all the time, especially this time of year. So we've seen a couple of ways to sneak things in there to make sure everyone's on the same page. All right, we'll take 2 more questions, friends, okay? Grant, I have an extremely detailed PMA with more than 6 work objectives. What are my options? Intend on respectful but gentle pushback.
I mean, if they're intending on respectful but gentle pushback, that seems like the right approach. Sometimes what we've found is that that with the PMAs, it often is an education process for managers as well too, who are don't necessarily have the skills, or were never provided the training, or don't even understand what SMART objectives are. So sometimes it is necessary to go back to them just to sort of like remind them of like what Treasury Board is looking for in terms of objectives, to make sure that they're clear to you. And it sounds like it's not clear to you, or they're too detailed. So that's a good thing to raise to them. And you do have to do a little bit sometimes of that education process with them too, even though it's not necessarily your job. But the federal public service is a pretty big place, and not every manager necessarily has developed those skills necessary. So it's an opportunity to help them out, I would say. Okay.
Yeah, and again, contact us, right? So the good news is, members, the jobs that we do, there's often other members that do this. So I would look into what was done in previous years. What are your other coworkers doing? And maybe you're the only person doing this in your department. If you contact us, we might have examples from different members to have an idea, is it too much or too little? But I like where the question is going, is you're looking at this saying, you know what, this might be too much to have on my plate, might be too detailed. So having that dialogue, I think, is going a long way. Okay, last one. Oh, someone got voted up recently. How do you deploy or change jobs if the employee needs a reference from their current job with the manager in conflict with PMA?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the toughest situations that we have in labor relations, is because generally speaking, in the financial community, in the NCR at least, there's a fair amount of mobility, right? So employees, if you're not happy in your current situation, or if you want to change, or you want to do something different, you have the opportunity to do so. But if you don't have a positive reference, and you have issues in your PMAs, it's a huge challenge. And there's no easy way out of this. I can certainly speak from experience that I have, a number of members that have been caught in bad situations, bad work environments for years, simply because they don't have positive references from their immediate supervisors. And now we see, it's just it's almost a given that hiring managers will want to have a reference from the immediate supervisor. So the PMA is part of that now. Having a good PMA is part of what will be required to move on if you're in a difficult situation. So that's part of the challenge of labor relations is helping employees to negotiate those things on their own, or to make the PMA look as positive as we can through writing your own comments. And as I said before, if you have a supervisor who's who's doing a bad job of writing up a PMA, not providing sloppy comments, providing unclear objectives, impossible to meet objectives. But you also have an employee who's written positive comments of their own that are very detailed, very professional, trying to be as objective as possible, that are attached to those. Then you just have to hope that when an objective observer is looking at that down the road, that they will be that they will understand that. But this, for sure, this is a huge challenge. It's one of our most difficult challenges we have in labor relations, is to help people move on when they have bad performance appraisals and when they have supervisors that are not willing to provide a good reference. Danny, do you have any answer to that one?
Yeah, I'll add two things maybe, but I agree with what you just said, Grin. It's very delicate, right? What do you do if you had a bad performance in the past year? I would say two things. Number one is you want to disclose this and be transparent right from the get-go. It is better if you address it before your potential manager finds out, because by that point, it's probably too late, right? So at some point when you meet your potential manager, they might ask you, why are you looking for a deployment or a promotion? You want to disclose that. You can say, you know what, I've always loved my department, but it wasn't working too well with a specific manager, and say why. Be specific, because they might understand now that, okay, at least you were transparent, and the way you're bringing it up is very professional. The way you stand out, the way you're speaking, and the fact that you're transparent speaks volumes to your professionalism and your ability to deal with issues. So they might be much more willing to let go of a bad reference. More specifically, if your other reviews were always good, right? If you've never had an issue and you say, I have a new boss now, things are not working well, you want to be transparent. That's our first thing. The second thing is, again, this is why it's so important to have a good network, friends, because if people know you, they won't care if you have a bad reference from one person. If you're friends with a director, or you know an FI3 somewhere and they've worked with you on various projects, they're like, I don't care about Jamie's review. I know he's a good candidate. He's good to go, right? And I know you might say, well, that's not fair because I'm not good at soft skills and networking. This is why you should add this to your professional development, friends. The social skills is as important as the technical skills. And we had a question on this one that said, well, how come we don't measure and we don't put enough value in technical skills? Because the technical skills, by default, we're all pretty good at that one. More some than others. But the social skills is really, we have a much larger spectrum of members that have more or less. I'm going to end it on that because we always try to keep these within 1 hour. I know we had plenty of questions left. Please, if your question was not answered, or at any point in time, if you have a question, contact us at ACFO. We can go in detail on your question. And if you want to keep it anonymous, you can just call us. You don't need to say your name. We can have an offline conversation with you because we know it's delicate. I hope this was beneficial for you guys. Next week, we're going to be talking about professional development on training, both on the Joint Career Development Program, but also the Controllership Training Center, which is the Professional Development Institute that ACFO created, in which we talk about the soft skills, by the way. So thank you for joining us today. Thanks for Grant Boland, Labor Relations Advisor, and thanks to Joe Bugner, who's in the background doing these things. We will see you all next week. Until then, take care, friends. Bye-bye.